I'm going to go ahead and get going here. Let me get this over here. So, and people will join, I assume, as they get the link. But first of all, thank you for being here tonight. For the ones that have shown up here tonight, you could be here, it could be anywhere, but you chose to invest in your health tonight, and so I'm excited and that you're here. And my goal tonight, and our goal tonight, is simple. And I want you to understand why you may feel tired, why you may feel foggy or stuck, and why it's not your fault. And that's why we're here tonight. But before we get going, I want to introduce Sherry Kramer. She is going to be sharing her testimony tonight and about a protocol that at the end we'll be talking about and how it impacted her in insulin resistance. And my wife, Jennifer, she's going to be sharing with me as well. And but before we get going on, I'm going to be taking us through some science about insulin resistance and different things like that. So let me go ahead to my next slide here. If I can get it to work, there we go. So what to expect tonight? I'm going to cover why we feel tired, why we feel foggy or stuck, the gut metabolism connection that most people miss, the real role of why insulin in energy and there's cravings, right? A simple rhythm to restore our energy and control our appetite. And then we're going to have some real stories from Sherry, Jennifer, and myself. You're not going to hear any medical advice tonight. I'm not a doctor. I'm a certified gut health specialist, but you're going to hear truth backed by science and real world results. So if you're on here tonight live, or if you're watching this replay, which we'll put out for a replay, I want you to do something for me for a moment. I want you to look around this circle here, and I want you to ask yourself, do I have any of these symptoms? Right? Do I have low energy? Maybe we have brain fog. Maybe we've got too much weight around the middle, right? Maybe type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, fatty liver, heart disease, mood swings, right? Maybe we don't sleep well. Um, Maybe you have more than one of these things, right? What if I told you these aren't separate problems? What if I told you they're all connected? Have you ever heard that before? That these might trace back to the same root cause. You see, most of these things around this circle, right, have a doctor for almost every one of these. But there's a common driver, and that's called insulin resistance, and it ties all these together. So tonight's not about willpower. It's not about laziness. When we start thinking about some of the things related to food, this is about a hormone. And once you understand this tonight, I think it's all going to start to make sense to you. And just a second, because my little thing went away and I can't change my slides. There we go. All right. So before we talk about insulin resistance, we need to understand what insulin really is. There's this small organ right behind your stomach called the pancreas. And it's not very big, but it has this massive job. And every time you eat, and especially carbohydrates, but anytime we eat, your pancreas senses the rise and releases insulin. And so insulin is a hormone that is produced by the pancreas that acts like a key to unlock your cells so your sugar can the sugar can enter and be used for energy because our cells need that to eat, right? Insulin is not the enemy here, right? Insulin is absolutely necessary. And without insulin, you can't use your fuel, right? It acts as that key to unlock the door in your cell. Have you ever felt tired right after eating? That tells us something about how the key is working, right? If you're experiencing those kind of things, it says our key's not working so well. The problem isn't insulin, though. The problem is when the key stops working properly, and that's insulin resistance. And we're going to talk more about that. Basically, your cells are starving while your blood is overloaded with sugar. And this is what insulin resistance kind of looks like. And I'm going to try to show it in this graph a little bit. When your insulin on the screen side, the left side probably for you, when the insulin is working properly, the key fits the lock, right? Glucose enters the cell, energy is produced, and you have stable blood sugar. And this is how we're supposed to feel: steady, clear, and stable. But when the signal is blocked, okay, the key is there, but the door, and that's on the right side where we got this resistance cell, with the key, we put the key in, we turn it, but the door doesn't open fully, and the sugar stays in the blood. The cells feel low energy. So your blood has fuel, but the cells feel tired because they cannot get the fuel into the cell. Have you ever felt tired right after eating, right? That's insulin resistance, right? Have you ever craved more sugar, even though you just ate? That's insulin resistance. Have you ever felt foggy in the afternoon? That's insulin resistance, okay? So this is why it feels like your body is working against you because hormonally it is, right? This is not about calories. It's all about signaling. And when that signaling is broken down, everything downstream starts to break down. Okay, so the question isn't, do I have willpower? The question is, how did the signaling get blocked? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So when your insulin stays high, your body cannot burn fat. So when we have that insulin in our bloodstream, right, it doesn't matter how hard you try. Instead of burning fuel, your body will start to store it. Belly fat increases, triglycerides rise, right? How many of you have ever heard or been told your triglycerides are high? That's not random. High insulin, also, there in the middle of the chart, creates energy crashes, right? Have you ever felt tired after eating, right? That's where we get a big blood sugar swing because our insulin goes up high and responds quickly, and then it pushes that blood sugar down, right? And it crashes. And then we have those blood sugar swings and we start to crave sugar, right? Insulin doesn't just affect fat, but it also affects the brain, okay? Brain fog, mood swings, instability. Have you ever felt off but really couldn't explain why? Well, hormones will drive the mood
No,
is in the gut
students are
as
available.
well.
Yeah.
I've got somebody, if you could please go on mute. Thank you. High insulin is the root uh, of metabolic dysfunction. Okay. Most people in insulin resistance is that root of the metabolic dysfunction that we go through. And most people focus on blood sugar, but insulin is the driver. You can have normal blood sugar and still have high insulin. So the real question becomes, why is insulin staying high? And we're going to talk about
Down by
that.
10. Mercy.
Can you guys hang on a second? I'm having issues with my computer. I lost my screen. Could I get somebody to tell me if they can see me or hear me?
I can hear and see you.
Okay, sorry, I lost my screen for a second. All right. So you should see on your screen, how did we get here, right? Well, insulin resistance doesn't happen overnight, does it? It happens with chronic overload. And let me ask you something. Did it happen with one cookie, right? Did someone just eat a cookie and all of a sudden they're a type 2 diabetic or a pre-diabetic? No, right? It didn't happen at one holiday meal or one bad weekend, right? It happened for us and many people over constant years of overstimulation, right? This gauge represents your system under stress. And every time we eat refined carbs, snack constantly, key, snack constantly, eat late at night, live under chronic stress, right? And we don't sleep well, we spike insulin. And when insulin stays elevated long enough, the system goes into overload. Your body was never designed to store all day. It was designed to cycle. In other words, we go into a burn period where we're burning fat. We're burning that fat of our system and get the sugar out of the system, and then we come back and we store. But when we eat all the time, right, we stay always in our fat storage mode. But when insulin never drops, right, we're never able to get there. So insulin resistance, like I said, doesn't happen overnight. It happens from constant exposure. It happens from frequent glucose spikes, insulin spikes repeatedly, and our cells stop responding. And I want you to think of insulin resistance like this. If someone knocks on your door 50 times a day, eventually you kind of ignore it, right? Or if you're hearing a noise, insulin resistance is really your cells becoming deaf to the insulin and not responding. And so therefore, we're really going back to that picture that I showed earlier, where we're starving our cells because we can't get that door open because now the cells have ignored it and not listening anymore. That's why a type 2 diabetic, we got to keep giving them more insulin and more insulin and more insulin because their insulin stays high all the time and then eventually starts ignoring it. Let's talk about something that we are actually taught to do, right? How many of you have heard that you should eat 6 to 8 small meals a day, right? Yeah, what's that?
Small, healthy meals.
Small, healthy meals. That's right. How many of you heard that, right? Maybe you want to put that in the chat, but think about that for a minute. We've heard that many times. Well, here's the problem. Every time you eat, even something small, insulin rises. Breakfast, you get an insulin spike. Snack, a spike. Lunch, you get a spike. Snack again, a spike. And if insulin stays elevated, and you're going to keep hearing me talk about this because I want folks to understand this, your body never switches out of that storage mode. Your body never gets a chance to rest, right? It is a switch that when we are in that mode, right, when insulin's in that bloodstream, you cannot burn fat, right? So how many of you snack between meals? I used to do that all the time, right? How many of you feel like you need something every 2 to 3 hours? How many of you feel tired shortly after eating? Again, I'm going to say it's not about willpower because that's really important for me. And I'll explain that a little bit why I keep saying that, but it's about hormones, okay? Because this ties to the gut. Here's something that most people really haven't thought a whole lot about and how this all ties together. But most people never hear the true importance of fiber and its connection to insulin resistance and blood sugar spikes. Fiber isn't just about digestion. Fiber slows glucose spikes. Fiber lowers insulin, okay? Fiber feeds your gut bacteria. And here's the shocking part. Only about 5% of Americans, we get enough, right? And when we remove fiber and we add sugar, the system starts to break down. You know, how many of you on this call tonight are really getting at least 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day? And we really, I think, need more, in my opinion. But most of us aren't because of our diet. And when fiber disappears, right, inflammation increases. And here's the part that most people miss, and I missed it for years myself, and what I've come to learn, right? So most of these things, these are applying, and I'm speaking to myself tonight when I talk about this because I was insulin resistant and starting to heal now myself. But most people don't realize that 70 to 80% of your immune system, it lives in your gut. Your gut bacteria influences insulin sensitivity. Fiber turns into these things called short chain fatty acids that improve your insulin response. In other words, makes your cells more efficient and be able to accept that sugar into the cell better, right? But high sugar damages the gut lining, right? And now we get this gut inflammation, which increases systemic inflammation, which worsens insulin resistance, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So if you think about it, and the question for you tonight here, and this is, has anyone ever told you your labs are normal, but they still feel terrible, right? Well, a lot of times when we have that, our labs don't pick this kind of thing up, right? But this is what's causing a lot of our problems when it comes to insulin sensitivity, that when our gut is not balanced, right, we get into this inflammation. So when we remove the fiber and add sugar, right, to our system, the system starts to break down. We get this poor gut health. Processed seed oils, for example, impact that. Chronic stress. And when we remove that fiber, add the sugar, we start to get into problems. And we get into this loop, right? In our fast-paced days, or days that we live today, right, we're eating highly processed food that leads to gut inflammation, that leads to systemic inflammation and increased permeability. And what that means is that we get into this thing called dysbiosis within inside of our gut, where the food that we're eating creates this dysbiosis, meaning that we've got more bad bacteria than good bacteria. And it eats little holes inside of our gut, right, that leaks these toxins out into our bloodstream. And we have this immune response to take care of that, but that's what's causing inflammation. And then we get noise signaling problems because we got all this inflammation in our body and we get the insulin spikes. And so our insulin doesn't respond the way it should. So I want to zoom out for just a minute and ask ourselves, if this is happening at the cellular level, if we're chronically overloaded, right? If we've removed fiber and added sugar, if insulin stays high, then what do you think's happening to our population? What do we think is causing it? Why are people getting sicker? What has changed over time? Because if we go back and look at years back, like when my dad and I saw pictures of that, they were all skinny, right? They didn't have as many issues. My grandmother lived to be in her late 90s, right? And what has changed, right? So let's talk a little bit about what's changed and causing us to be sick today. Okay. So, first of all, 9 out of our 10 leading causes of death are lifestyle driven. Okay. And are largely preventable. And I want you to look at this for a minute. This chart's a little outdated, but it's really, really close to what it looks like. In fact, number 6 has moved down further, and there's some other metabolic things that are on here. But if you look at this data, look at what stands out. These 9 of the 10 of them are not infectious diseases. They are chronic metabolic diseases. If insulin resistance drives heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, diabetes, then we're not dealing with separate problems, are we? We're dealing with the root cause of all of these things right here. And I even contend that this lower respiratory infection could be related to insulin resistance because the gut impacts our health, right, in about 60 or about 70, 80% of our immune system. And so when that is lowered or low, we have a low response, a respiratory to infections and have not a very good ability to fight those off, right? So our gut plays a big key into number 6 as well. So take a look at these graphs for a minute. Something shifted, right, in our timelines here. Obesity was relatively stable for years, and then something happened in the late 70s. Diabetes followed the same curve, right? So what changed over the last 50 years, right? What has changed and caused this food? Well, I'm going to show you 3 major shifts that's happened. The food industry didn't just add sugar, they named it. They have over 100 different names for it. 74% of packaged foods contain added sugar. And if not, it may be higher than that today. And most people don't even realize it, right? And many of many of us don't really check our labels. And we think about some of these things and we're, well, that's healthy, right? But they're loaded with sugar, right? And how many of you think about, well, evaporated cane juice as being sugar? And some of these things that are put in are what I would call sugar-friendly foods, right? Like maltodextrin, right? They put it in there because it's not a sugar. They're able to call it sugar-free food, right? But it really actually is the worst thing to raise your insulin level because it responds and it's a sugar-free food and really unhealthy for you. But I want you to look at this. This isn't about willpower, right? Sugar lights up the reward center of the brain. Studies show it can be more addictive than cocaine in certain models. That's not a weakness, folks. That's biology. But here's what makes it worse, right? Naturally packaged carbohydrates with fiber. Fiber slows our glucose spikes, right? The food industry is stripping fiber from our food, right? And so our white bread is completely stripped and even our wheat breads. They're stripped from the fiber. Think about apple juice, right? Which one do you think is going to increase our insulin response? Apple juice or the apple, right? God wrapped that juice in this beautiful fiber that helps keep our insulin down, right? So the food industry has stripped all the fiber out of our food, which impacts our gut and then doesn't allow it to be fed appropriately. So fiber helps us feel full, right? So that we don't overeat. It lowers our glucose spikes. It feeds the beneficial bacteria and it lowers those triglycerides. And yet only 5% of us in the United States, or really probably around the world, but mostly in the United States, are getting enough fiber. And when we remove that fiber and add sugar, high sugar damages that gut lining, like I said earlier, and gut imbalances increases. That gut imbalance increases inflammation. Inflammation disrupts the insulin signaling And this becomes a very, a vicious cycle that we get caught into. And when I was talking about earlier about willpower, and what I mean by this is the bad bacteria, okay, they crave sugar. They crave those things that come from highly processed foods, and they need that to grow. And so they signal it up to your brain through hormones, through your nervous system, up through the vagus nerve to say, feed me. And so that's why we have cravings. Number three is the change in our guidelines steering us wrong. Now, the good thing is recently this pyramid has been flipped upside down. But in the 1980s and the 90s, we were told fat was the enemy, right? So we replaced fat with refined carbohydrates, right? 6 to 11 servings of grains per day. Now I want you to think about it. What do we feed our cows to get them fat? Oats, right? And corn and all these different grains, right? And that's what we're feeding ourselves, and we were told to feed ourselves. Snack frequently, eat every 2 to 3 hours, and that means insulin never gets a break. So our insulin stays high all the time. Therefore, we never get into a fat burning mode. So here's the result. Only 7% of us are metabolically healthy. 93% of the American population falls somewhere on this spectrum that you're seeing on the slide. That means insulin resistance is not rare, and it's the norm, and it shows up in more ways than people realize, right? Insulin resistance, when insulin stays high, okay, you can't burn fat. And you keep hearing me say that, but it's the truth. Triglycerides rise, inflammation rises, hormonal shifts happen, and that symptom shows up at all these different diagnoses that you see on the screen here. And they're not separate. They share that root cause of insulin resistance. And it's just not old age, right? How many of you have been to the doctor and they say, well, you're just starting to get older, right? This is just normal. I had a person the other day, one of my clients, and they got their blood results out and they're approaching stage 3 kidney disease. And they're like, well, that's just part of growing older, right? Well, it's not. It's because of what we're eating and how we're eating, right? And not doing time-based eating like our bodies were designed to. In result number two, only 5% of us are getting enough fiber, right? High sugar, constant insulin, low fiber, chronic inflammation causes all these different things that you're seeing, right? So two root causes, right, that we get into in this link between insulin resistance and improper gut balance tie in to cause these kind of problems for us that I showed on that very first slide that's going around that circle, right? Fatty liver, overweight, IBS, IBD, gut problems, right, are all tied to these two things that I've got on the slides tonight. So now I want to share with you a couple things, or like 4 things that are big myths that people I'd like to share with you, because when I talk about these things, I just kind of like to bust some myths that people that were taught. The first one is myth number 1: snacking boosts the metabolism. If you're on here tonight, how many of you have heard that, right? Well, the truth is snacking all day keeps insulin high and never lets your body burn fat, right? When we start to get into fat mode, we go from burning sugar, then we burn fat. And until that insulin is down and that sugar is burned out, we never get there. Myth number 2, fat makes you fat. Well, the truth is healthy fats can actually stabilize blood sugar and help keep you full. So that's where we need to turn that food pyramid around right now. For clarity, healthy fats, right? Yeah. Not seed oils and things like that. Sugar and refined carbs are the bigger issue, though, for insulin. Myth number 3, calories are everything. Truth is, hormones like insulin decide whether you store or burn those calories. 1,500 calories with constant insulin spikes is not the same as 1,500 with stable blood sugar. And I'm going to show you that here in a minute and what I mean by that and why that's so important. So I'm going to explain here in a few moments why someone that could eat 3,000 calories can lose weight, and that same person, if they only ate 1,500 calories, may gain weight and never be able to get it off. And we'll explain that here in a minute. Myth number 4, It's a willpower problem. You've heard me. This is my big soapbox. I get really upset when I hear people pushing on people and saying, hey, you need to have more willpower. The truth is there's this metabolic dysfunction that's happening inside our body that's driving these cravings, the hunger, and energy crashes. They are hormonal signals. So if you're on this call tonight and you're just going, wow, I'm feeling so bad about myself. Well, there's something happening in there, right? Our guts are signaling to say, eat this bad stuff. It's not a character flaw, folks. It's something that needs to be fixed inside your gut. And we're going to talk about how we do that.
Mm.
So, why conventional advice fails? Medicine focuses on numbers and not healing. And so, if you're on this call, one thing I want to do clearly is there is a place for medicine, okay? There's a place for it. But in this case, what we're talking about tonight, right? Meds tend to focus on those numbers, not healing lower blood sugar on paper, right? They don't fix high insulin. They don't change the root cause, right? They really manage the symptom. Diets focus on calories and not hormones. So a lot of times when we go in diets, the reason we've got the overweight or things like that is because there's something metabolically going on wrong inside of, and cutting those calories just won't fix that. We need to heal from the inside out so we can then lose weight appropriately. A lot of times diets will often spike those insulin more and they're exhausting to maintain. So if you're on a diet and you're just tired and you can't get there and you're having those crashes, well, it's because your insulin's probably spiking or your gut microbiome's really messed up, right? And it's in dysbiosis. The root cause is rarely addressed in conventional advice, right? Or medicine. Insulin resistance isn't solved. Gut inflammation and lifestyle overload need to be solved. You don't need another diet. You need a reset. So the good news is this is completely reversible. Insulin levels can drop, cells can regain sensitivity, the gut can repair, inflammation can calm. So how do we reverse insulin resistance? And there's four key things that I like to focus on, right? Lowering the glucose load, reduce sugars and refined carbs, increase fiber and support the gut. We feed the microbiome, the good guys in our gut, right? And get a good balance there. Give insulin space to fall, right? Stop constant snacking plus better timing. And we're going to talk about number three here in a few minutes. That is so, so important because when we have those spikes that go up and down, right? We need space in between those spikes, okay? And then reduce inflammation, getting good sleep, good reducing our stress and hydration. So now that we understand what's working against our bodies, I'm going to start to talk about healing it. Most people try to feel better simply by eating less, and we've talked a little bit about that. And that's called calorie restriction. And it usually leaves you tired, grumpy, hangry, crashes in energy by midday, lacking mental clarity, struggling to lose weight, right? Or you lose it quickly, then you gain it back. But I want to get into something that's called time-based eating, aka fasting. Now, if you're on here, don't run away because sometimes fasting scares people, right? But with time-based eating, we can go longer periods without food without becoming hangry, right? Enjoy better mental clarity, energized throughout the day, and it supports fat burning and metabolic flexibility. Okay. I'm not going to be talking about restricting your calories. It's not talking about starving. It's about time-based eating when we eat and shifting that so you can have a long period of time of low insulin so that your body has time to heal, right? And get into fat burning mode. So that's what happens when you fast, right? I'm going to talk about 3 periods of getting into fasting here just for a few moments. And I could spend a whole hour on just fasting alone, but I want to try to break it down here for you. At hour zero, from the last time when we stop eating, right? When we go in and we take our last bite, from 0 to 12 hours, our blood sugar is still stabilizing and insulin's dropping. So a lot of people say, well, I've stopped eating and I haven't eaten for 4 hours and I'm in fat burning mode. That doesn't happen. It usually takes the average person 12 hours to get into fat burning mode. Now, that will vary depending on their metabolic flexibility, how healthy they are, how healthy their gut is. But around 12 to 16 hours, we get into fat burning. Inflammation will start to decrease and hunger hormone reduces. And I'm not going to spend any time on the right side of this graph where or this picture tonight. It's been an hour 16 to 24 hours. We get into autophagy where we start to clean up our cells and human growth hormone increases. But let me make certain you understand something here. If when I stop eating and I go and I get to hour 10 and I eat an almond or I eat a blueberry, the clock resets. So I never got into fat burning. So when we hear constantly, and this isn't just Scott Harker saying this, right? Metabolic scientists like Dr. Ben Buchman, and Dr. Jason Fung, this is what they teach, and they've got all the science behind it. Go look those guys up. They can explain it a lot better than I can. But what really happens is so we go and we eat, we drink a coffee and we put some sugar in it or even honey, even though honey's healthy, right? We do this. Our fasting starts over and the clock starts all over again, right? So when we're eating constantly, we never get into that fat burning mode. So here's what's exciting I want to share with you tonight. When you fast, even just 12 to 16 hours, right, our insulin starts to drop. Our body starts to switches from storing fat to burning fat. Inflammation, it starts to calm. Your brain gets clearer. It's not magic. It's just biology. So the question becomes, what if we could do this intentionally? What if there's something that we could do to create this shift on purpose? What if we didn't need another diet, but a metabolic reset? You've just seen me explaining what happens naturally when insulin falls, right? We're going to talk about something tonight, a protocol called the Feel Great system, and around creating this hormonal environment, this hormonal shift, this consistency, this safe environment and sustainability. It's not about starving. It's not about cutting calories endlessly. It's about lowering glucose load, right? Increasing fiber, increasing space between meals, and calming inflammation, right? It's simply applying biology that I just talked about. So here's where I get into the fun part that I really enjoy. We're going to bring Sherry Kramer on. I haven't got to hear Sherry's story, but Sherry's going to take 5 to 8 minutes or so of sharing her story about what it was like living with insulin resistance before and now starting to become more insulin sensitive. And if you can look at this picture, you can see this huge change in Sherry. And I know it'd be great to have her story. So Sherry, if you could come on and share your story for a few moments and tell the group. I'm gonna flash this up and then I'm actually going to take it down so they can make certain that everybody can see you, and then I'll switch back to some slides here in a minute. Okay, so everybody take a look at this picture, look at this change left to right. How awesome, right? And excited. And I'm excited to hear your story, Sherry. I haven't heard it before, so thanks for joining tonight. Okay, I'm going to quit sharing and I'm going to let you take the stage.
Thank you much, and thank you for the invite. Oh boy, what a story. Well, I just recently retired in November of 24. I was 63 now, but anyways, pretty much been overweight all my life. Started, when I turned 11 and 12, started putting on weight, and I was diagnosed with underactive thyroid and all that stuff. And my family was an eating family. My mom knew how to cook, yada, 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 so we always had food. We had a large family, and it was like you grab or you don't get. So I mean, we all learned how to eat fast and quick and all that. And, she did a lot of home cooking. We didn't eat out a lot, but still, it catches up with you in a hurry. And I've been on the Feel Great system for a year now, little over a year. And before then, just like Scott was saying, I worked the last 10 years, and was at work, and after lunch, I would eat my lunch, and I would usually go out to my car if I could or whatever, even during the winter. And it was like, okay, now I need to take a nap. Had no clue what that was all about, but I was tired. I had terrible inflammation. I was hurting all the time, and I did work 4 days in a row. every other weekend at work for the last 10 years. And that was hard on my body because on my feet 12 hours a day, driving 2 hours, hour there, hour home, that was a long day. But on them days, I basically come home, had an hour to get ready to, get to bed, get into bed, get my sleep, and get up and get going and go the next day. So I was hurting. And I've been overweight, like I said, most of my life. And it's just been a struggle. Didn't know really, what it was all about. Didn't realize about insulin resistant. And then about a year and a half ago, never had high blood pressure. The rest of my family all had high blood pressure, never had high blood pressure. But about a year and a half ago, hadn't been to the doctor for a while because it wasn't on prescriptions. And went with hubby on one of his appointments and he says, your blood pressure is 185 over 110. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
No, no. And he said, yep, your A1C is 6 and my LDL was up higher than he wanted it. And so he's like, yeah, he says, we're going to put you on blood pressure, metformin, and statin. And I'm like, no, I'll take the blood pressure for now, but I'm not going on the other. I'd been looking at that for hubby, and I'm like, I'm not getting into that because I can see the side effects and whatever. And so I'm like, nope, not doing this. So then all that, combined, and then 2024, I had my left hip replaced. Just thought it was maybe bone spurs. Nope, it was bone on bone. And started the protocol shortly after I retired. I retired the 1st of November and then started the protocol middle of November. What a difference. I went from being tired and hurting all the time and couldn't lose weight. I basically gave up. I'm stuck. I'm staying here. And things started to turn around within the first week of starting the protocol. And I talked to my brother, and he kind of talked to me about it because I really hadn't known anything about it, but he had lost 30 pounds in 2 months and was off almost all of his blood pressure medicine. And that's what I was looking for. I've never been a pill person. I'm like, I'm not staying on this medication. I'm going to do something, whatever it is. And so the first week when I started this protocol, and it's not a joke whatsoever, I noticed a difference. I had my energy back up. I was starting to feel a little better. And I'm like, okay, and been there, done that with all the yo-yo dieting and whatnot, and trying this program, that program. Nothing. Yeah, I might have lost weight here and there, but not a huge amount. And of course, you know how that goes. It didn't stay off. So I'm like, yep, I'm skeptical. I'm thinking, okay, what is this going to do kind of thing. But I tell you what, the first thing that got my attention about this system was that it was all natural, and I don't want to go the medicine route and all that stuff. But the first week, I noticed my energy was up. I wanted to get up and do stuff. Within 3 weeks, I've had plaque psoriasis ever since I can remember. I had eczema, all that kind of stuff. And within 3 weeks, I'm like, something's changing here. And I noticed that was starting to go away. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this, And within 2 weeks, I'd lost 8 pounds. It wasn't a huge weight loss as far as, starting it out, but I was happy because I basically gave up. And within about 2 months, I was probably 20 pounds down. But the biggest thing for me is I was checking my blood pressure. Within 4 months of starting this system, I was running, like I said, my blood pressure was 185 over 110 before I started medicine. And when I was doing the medicine, it was 136 over 85. They're like, yeah, that's okay. We'll do that. So I was on a low dose. Within 4 months, it was running like in the 120s or something like that on medication. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to take a test here. And so I didn't take my medicine for a couple of days and was checking my blood pressure. It was 140 over 80 without medication. And so I left it for like that for a week, and I kept checking it, and it stayed right about in that range. And so in 4 months, I just, quit taking the blood pressure medicine and had an appointment coming up. So I was going to talk to my doctor about it. My A1C was 6. And within that time as well, was down to 5.6. And I'm like, okay. And he didn't like where my LDL was. It started out at 142. And the last time I got it checked is in July, was down to 120. And everything is just, all my numbers are trending down. I feel so much better. I've plateaued a little bit, but there's certain things can do with that, but I'm just totally happy. Hubby started about a month after I did, and he was diabetic, and his A1C was 6.7, and within less than a year, he's down to 5.6. And he had his one appointment, and the doctor's like, "Oh yeah, I think he was at 6.1 at the one time or something." The doctor says, "Yep, keep him on the metformin." I said, "Will do," because I knew a natural metformin, that he had been doing and whatnot. And so he was taken off metformin and statin and off all blood pressure but one. And he's down 30 pounds. I'm down 30 pounds now. He's pre-wedding weight and will be married 47 years this year. It's just been amazing through this protocol and what it's done. And I have my two boys on it. And my one son lost 40 pounds, but since June, my other son has lost over 50 pounds. And he said he has not been under 200 pounds in 15 years. And feeling better,
Awesome.
looking better, skin is doing better. And hubby, within a month, acid reflux was gone, restless leg, all that. I'm just overwhelmed and flabbergasted in an all natural product that tastes good, that you can take and just go on with your life, and it's amazing, and I will never get off it.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Sherry, I hadn't heard your story, so that's an awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That's so great. I really appreciate that, and what an impact and change it's making in your life and your whole family. So thank you for sharing that. Make sure you hang on because I may have some more questions for you here in a few minutes as we go. And can you guys see the slides still?
I notice it in
Can
my
I get a
face. My face was just so fat and puffy, and it's just awesome.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. So I'm going to share a couple pictures here just for a few minutes of my wife and I. I don't have any of the pictures changed, but we're going to share. Hopefully, you can get Scoot in, Jennifer. So again, we're going to because I want to get to the protocol and share, but I want to yeah, but I want to share just a couple minutes about our story a little bit. Um, we started this protocol in March, late March, early April of last year in 2025. I'm going to just say my thing for a few minutes, and I want to turn it over because I've been speaking for 30 minutes before this. But in 16 weeks, I went down 45 pounds. Blood pressure went into normal range, reduced a lot of my inflammation that I had in my body. I'm staying up with my kids now. I think they think I'm kind of crazy. Lots of energy. I feel better than I did in my 30s. My psoriasis, while it's not completely gone, it has improved. And that's really due to the gut microbiome. My original reason for getting into gut metabolic health is because I had ulcerative colitis and my father died of colon cancer. And so this has been my real passion. And when I found this product, actually, a guy named Alan Kashner introduced me to this product, right? I did a lot of studying about it to make certain it was right to share with my clients and clean and safe. And then that's where the story comes in. Jennifer, if you could take about 5 minutes, we got about 5 minutes to 6 minutes for you
Speed
to
run.
share your story and the impact it's had on you and what's going on. So I'm going to just go for a minute, scoot in so people can see you because I don't know if they can see you or not because my screen's covered up here. So there we go.
Well, so basically from kind of like you, my mom was a wonderful cook. She baked everything. So I had, unlimited whatever, I wanted. And so I was insulin resistant I was probably from teens on, and I was on antidepressants from the time I was in my early 20s until just recently. And all the things like migraines, irritability, all the things on the wheel. And I have a very strong on both sides of my family of type 2 diabetes, stroke. My mom died of congestive heart failure. And so as I hit my mid 40s, I was struggling to lose the weight, as you could see on these pictures, and was trying to do all the right things like what I'd been taught, and it just wasn't coming off. And I was having more migraines, I was having more, just hormonal things going on. And I started having numbness in my hands. And I knew that was my dad has severe neuropathy with his type 2 diabetes. And I knew that was kind of a potential precursor because I had been, my doctor had been like, I'd been riding that pre-line of, pre-hypertensive, pre-diabetic, pre all the things for several years. And I'd been resistant to taking any more medication just because I wanted something natural. I wanted to do it on my own and, all these things. And so with the neuropathy, though, that scared me enough that I was like, all right, honey, like you got to figure something out. Like I need to, you've done all this gut, metabolic stuff. Like you need to figure me out, and that's a huge task. But anyway, um, so I was doing my fasting blood sugars. I was running in the 130 to 140s, and that was after, basically fasting from like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night until 6:30, so I was hitting that 11, 12 hour mark, and my fasting blood sugars were still in the 130s to 140s. And we started this protocol, and within 2 weeks, they were in the 90s. The neuropathy went away. Um, I have had I have had diagnosed migraines since I was the first one I remember getting. I was 9 years old, and I've had them pretty chronically my whole life. Now, I still get, wouldn't say full on migraines. They're more like when we get a storm front that moves through, I'll sometimes one will trigger, but they're nowhere near severe.
You're our barometer.
Yeah, I'm the barometer. They're nowhere near as severe. They don't wipe me out for days at a time. I don't really have to take any prescription medication. There were many times that I would have to go to the ER and they would have to inject me with all kinds of stuff just to get me, But the biggest thing for me, I had been on those antidepressants for over 30 years. And I wanted to get off of them, but every time I would try and like, that whole willpower thing, I'm going to choose to be joyful. I'm going to choose this. I'm going to, it just didn't work. And so within about, if I didn't take my medicine within, I'd say 12 to 24 hours, I was feeling terrible, like just in that dark place. If I continued and didn't take them, my kids, my husband were like, do you need a refill on your medicine? Did you forget to take your pills? And then that would just really make me mad because I'm like, what do you mean? What's the matter with you? And so it was last summer, and I like to test my husband. And I was just kind of like, if this whole gut thing is like really what he says it is, and I'd been doing the protocol religiously very well. I'd lost the 40+ pounds. Everything else was going, my numbers, everything was going in the right direction. And I'm like, I'm just gonna see if the rubber really meets the road here with this. And I stopped taking them. Okay, I didn't follow. This is not medical advice. Please do not do this because it was not good.
It's not the right way to do this, but
right way to do it, especially after being on it for over 30 years. I basically gave myself a week. I kind of tapered for about a week and a half, and then I just stopped. And so I had obviously some withdrawal and side effects from that, but that was totally different than what would have normally happened with me going into that dark place and feeling worthless and not, oh, nobody will miss me if I'm gone, that kind of stuff. And were we out to eat or something? And I dropped a bomb. I was like, honey, how do you think I've been doing lately? And he was like, oh, that's a loaded question. What do you mean? And I said, well, I stopped taking my medicine. And he's like, what do you mean you stopped taking your medicine? And I said, well, I just wanted to see if this stuff, if my gut truly was healed, and what you say about leaky gut and me feeding my good bacteria and the whole like happy hormones and all the things, I just wanted to see how, how that all worked out for me. And I can honestly say I don't have days where I'm like worthless and feel like I don't have those dark days. Now there's days when I have more energy. I'm perimenopausal, I'm into the menopausal part of my life now, and that's a whole fun. But that's anyway. But I don't have, there's a marked difference between what I did when I would test myself before my gut was healed versus now. There's a marked difference. Um, I do have more energy. Your sister was up, this summer, and I was like, I'm gonna go for a walk. And she's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I have more energy. I need to do this. I need to go and do things. And so, um, it's for me, it's just all of those things and just being able to be off of that medicine has been freeing and liberating. And it truly does, you know, what he says, it truly does work that way. So sorry, that
No,
was
that's
longer
great.
than 5 minutes,
No,
but
that's okay. Well, thanks for sharing your story. I'm going to get into now, and so it has. It's been life-changing for us, and just been really great for us. What I'm going to do is now is actually get into, we've been talking about the protocol. And some of you said, well, I've waited 45, 50 minutes to find out what's going on. What are these guys talking about, right? Well, let's get to the point, right? And I want to share this with you because we use two simple tools, right? And hopefully you can see this. Is that the first one is a fiber that we use, right? And if you remember, I talked to my presentation about how important the fiber is. And we drink this fiber, and I'm going to take a time to mix it up, but basically, and I will show how we use it here in a minute, but we take this fiber 1 to 2 times a day, and the protocol says 1 time a day, but there are times where you may take it twice. But this helps curb our appetite between meals. It supports that normal healthy blood glucose levels, right? It starts to, I call it healing and sealing our gut, right? It aids in the amount of dietary cholesterol that's absorbed in the bloodstream, right? And it lowers that glucose spike that we get. And you can't really see it on the screen here, but what you see at the University of Sydney, which is what I call the father of the glycemic index, right? But what happens is when you take this right before you eat, about 30 minutes before, you take it when you start to eat and your food starts to turn into that glucose, it takes that spike out of there, right? And you don't get the spike, and it can lower it to somewhere between 35 and 40% depending on what you're eating, right? And has a huge impact on that. The other thing is this acts like helps with cholesterol and helps. And if you can read that up, it says such a product if taken regularly could reduce cardiovascular risk on a population basis and potentially decrease the need for lipid lowering prescription drugs. Think of things like Tricor and things like that that helps with your triglycerides and drugs like that work with your cholesterol, right? This feeds the gut microbiome. IBS helps with IBS, constipation, diarrhea. You heard both Sherry and I talk about our skin conditions, right? Because we're starting to help heal our body so that we can get rid of that inflammation. And one of the things I didn't talk about a whole lot is that when we start to heal our inflammation and whatnot, and that signaling gets correct, then we can start to lose our weight, right? And we can start to get into that fat burning mode a lot easier, right? And so while we don't talk about this as a product that we use to lower our weight, we do it from a natural standpoint because we start to heal with inside. The next product that we use, or next tool, and I like to talk about it as a tool, it makes our fasting easier. It's called Unamate, right? And it's from an yerba mate plant from South America, right? And it supports the feeling of well-being. It supports our cognitive process and helps maintain our endurance and stamina. And what it does is it allows us during our fasting period, and I'm going to talk about how we use this with fasting or time-based eating in a minute, but helps us stay in that period when we're not eating so that we don't feel hungry. Okay. And it also helps the body naturally produce up to 67% more of our GLP-1. Now, don't mistake me. This is not a GLP-1. Our bodies naturally do that. And that, in fact, this works better than the drugs that are out there out in the market, right? Where we talk about taking the GLP-1 shots, right? Our bodies, when we start to heal it, will actually work better than those shots. And this is what helps your body do that. And I won't go into an explanation of how that GLP-1 works, but what it does is it allows us then to start burning our fat and stay in that fat burning mode more naturally, and then helps us promote our body's ketone production. And that's so important in our fat burning side around hour 16 when we're in our fast, because our fatty acids are now turning to ketones, which our brain just absolutely loves. And that's why it helps support that cognitive process. So we use these two tools in conjunction with intermittent fasting or time-based eating. So this is very simple to use. We have these two products, right? Or two tools. We don't eat in the morning. We don't eat breakfast, right? We break our fast, right? Or we don't break our fast. We don't eat breakfast. We get up in the morning and we take this and we put it in a bottle that looks like this and we shake it up, or you can put it in whatever and shake it up. Some people like it hot. My wife likes it hot. I like it cold. And we use this unamate and we sip on this throughout the morning until lunchtime. And if lunch is your heaviest carb-laden meal of the day or biggest, then we take our balance, okay? And this is a fiber that we take, and we take that 15 to 30 minutes before we eat, and we chug that. And we do that at either lunch or dinner. Now, sometimes we take two, depending if we're going to eat out a little bit more. And then during midday in the afternoon, around 2 or 3 o'clock, we drink another one of these yerba mates, right? And we do that, and that helps us go through the afternoon without needing and craving any food or snacks. So remember what I said is every time we eat, our insulin goes up and we get the spikes. So the whole point of this is to keep that insulin low. So we're only eating in a window of from lunch to dinner time. So we try to get folks to a ratio of 16 hours fast and an 8-hour eating window, right? Eating at lunch and dinner with no snacking. And these tools allow us to do that easily. I'm going to tell you, fasting was hard for me until I did this, and it became very, very easy. So let me talk about the solution and these tools. This product has 5 patents. It's in the PDR. Now, what's that mean? PDR stands for Physician's Desk Reference. That is what your doctors go in and look at and go, when you have a symptom and you need to look up a drug, you can go in and look at there and say, how can it be dosed? How can it be used? This is in your doctor's PDR. So you can take these products and look up Unamate Balance and Unamate Unamate Unicity Unamate. They're both in the PDR. Your doctors can look them up. They can see what they're all about and be able to look at. There's over 20 clinical studies, and you can see on the screen by the different universities. It's safe, it's natural, it's guaranteed. And what that means it is the company Unicity, which we get this from, is that if you use it for 90 days, and we use a tracker to track it, if you track that and you're using it for 90 days, and if it doesn't work for you and you're not happy, they refund all of your money in those 90 days. It's cost neutral, and I'm going to explain what that means here in a minute, and it's in 60 plus different countries. So what I mean by that is it's cost neutral is we save in our household $5 to $10 or more per person per day. And what I mean by that is since we're not eating as much, we're not eating breakfast, we're eating healthier, we actually offset the cost of this product, which is about $5.30 a day. Think about that. For $5.30 a day, you can improve your health, right? And you get it for $159 a month. And that's what we use in our house to be able to help us reduce with insulin resistance. And so this is what we want to share. And tonight, one of the things is when you get it through somebody like me, or there's others on the call. If you were invited by somebody, I see there's other people that use this and are distributors on here tonight. If they ask you to come on here, get with them if you're interested in this protocol. They can answer your questions. I'll be glad to answer your questions. I know Terry be willing. I know Bob, he's on there. I think I saw Leanne. If any of those folks is on there, you were invited with them, reach out to them. They can help you get that, because you can get it $159 a month. If you go out to the websites or other places, it's going to cost you $60 to $70 more per month. And not only that, you can find this on Amazon, but a good chance that it's not necessarily safe, because it may not be fresh, right? And we get this directly from the distributor, right? So tonight, I just want to say thank you for joining. If you have any questions about this, I'm going to be taking this Zoom call. It's been recorded tonight. We're going to be putting it out on Facebook. We're going to be putting it on YouTube. Go back and listen to it. reach out to any of us here that's it's invited you. We'd love to share this product with you. If you've got questions, if you're dealing with any of the things that's on here, or if you didn't understand something that I talked about so quickly on the presentation, reach out to me. I'll stay on for just a couple seconds after this and put my email in the chat, and you can send me questions about that. Sherry, do we have anything? I missed anything about the protocol or anything we want to share?
No, I think you did a great job. It's all natural. You can't go wrong with it. It's the only thing I say. It tastes good. And it's the easiest thing I've ever done. I wished I would have started sooner. Wished I would have known about this because I did have my sister that passed 3 years ago that had kidney failure, but she was diabetic for 20 years. I wished I had this for her, but it'll help you. Has helped me. It's a whole food in your diet. You can't go wrong with it. It's delicious. And it works.
All right. Well, guys, thank you. Hopefully hopefully you learned something about insulin resistance tonight, understanding about your health, busted a few myths out there. This is a product that we just are all passionate about sharing. I know, Sherry, you are. Bob, I see you on there. I see some other folks on there that share this product. And it's just become our passion to be able to share the product. Again, thank you. You could have been somewhere else tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time to learn about this, to take and invest in your health. This is life-changing and really disruptive to insulin resistance and the medical field. So everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for joining, and be looking for this on Facebook, YouTube. I'll be passing this out to other folks, and you'll see this live replayed different places so you can rewatch it. And if you got any questions, reach out to us. So thank you. Good night to everybody.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.